In a big, busy city filled with towering skyscrapers and endless traffic, there was a corporate office known for its high standards and intense work environment. The building stood tall among others, its glass windows reflecting the morning sunlight. Inside, employees rushed around, typing furiously on their computers, attending meetings and trying to meet tight deadlines. Among them was Maya, a talented black woman who had worked tirelessly to climb the corporate ladder. She wasn't just smart. She was determined, hardworking, and passionate about her job. Her colleagues respected her, but she often felt like she had to work twice as hard to prove herself compared to her peers. It wasn't something she talked about openly, but she noticed how small biases sometimes crept into conversations or decisions at work. Maya had been with the company for several years, steadily earning promotions and gaining recognition for her contributions. But even though she had achieved success, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was constantly being watched more closely than others. Sometimes it came in the form of backhanded compliments. "You're so articulate," someone might say, as if they hadn't expected her to speak well. Other times it was assumptions that she lacked ambition because of where she came from or the color of her skin. These moments weren't always glaringly obvious, but they added up over time, making her feel like she had to fight harder to belong. One day, an important client presentation was scheduled. This project had been months in the making, involving multiple teams working together to prepare reports, analyze data, and create polished slides. Everyone knew how crucial this presentation was. It could either strengthen the company's relationship with the client or damage it beyond repair. Maya had played a key role in coordinating efforts between departments, ensuring everything ran smoothly. She stayed late nights, double-checked numbers, and rehearsed her part of the presentation until she knew it by heart. By the time the big day arrived, she felt confident that everything would go perfectly. But things didn't go as planned. During the presentation, the client pointed out a glaring error in one of the reports. A critical calculation was wrong, leading to incorrect conclusions in the analysis. While the mistake wasn't catastrophic, it was enough to embarrass the company and make the client question their professionalism. As soon as the meeting ended, whispers spread through the office like wildfire. Who had made the error? Whose oversight had caused this blunder? People began pointing fingers almost immediately, each team blaming the other for the oversight. When news of the mistake reached the CEO's desk, he wasted no time calling an emergency meeting. His name was Richard, a man infamous for his quick temper and authoritarian leadership style. He ruled the company with an iron fist, expecting perfection from everyone but rarely acknowledging the hard work that went into achieving it. Employees dreaded being called into his office because they never knew whether they'd leave with praise or punishment. When Richard strode into the conference room that afternoon, his face red with anger, the tension in the air was palpable. Everyone sat stiffly in their chairs, avoiding eye contact and bracing themselves for what was about to come. Without wasting a second, Richard launched into a tirade. "Who is responsible for this?" he demanded, slamming his hands on the table. The sound echoed through the silent room, making everyone flinch. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, without hesitation, Richard turned his gaze directly toward Maya. "Maya," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "This is irresponsible. How could you let this happen?" The room froze. Maya blinked, stunned by the accusation. She hadn't been the only person involved in preparing the report. It had gone through multiple rounds of review, with input from various teams. Yet here was Richard, singling her out as if she were solely to blame. Before she could respond, he continued, his tone growing harsher with each word. "You're supposed to be a leader here, not someone who drops the ball when it matters most." Maya felt heat rising to her cheeks. She wanted to explain, to clarify that the mistake wasn't hers alone, but Richard didn't give her a chance. Instead, he went on berating her in front of everyone, using words like careless and irresponsible. Each accusation felt like a punch to the gut, not because of the criticism itself, but because of the unfairness of it all. She had poured her heart into this project, yet here she was, being publicly shamed while others sat quietly, letting her take the fall. As the meeting dragged on, Maya tried to stay composed. She clenched her fists under the table, reminding herself to breathe deeply. She knew reacting emotionally wouldn't help her case. It would only give Richard more ammunition to use against her. Still, it was hard not to feel defeated. This wasn't the first time she'd faced bias at work, but it was certainly the worst. She wondered if Richard would have reacted the same way if the person responsible had been someone else, someone who didn't look like her. By the end of the meeting, Richard made it clear that Maya would bear the brunt of the fallout. He assigned her additional tasks to make up for the mistake, piling on more work despite the fact that she already had a heavy workload. As people filed out of the room, some avoided her gaze altogether, while others offered weak smiles of sympathy. No one dared to challenge Richard's decision, not even those who knew full well that Maya wasn't entirely to blame. That evening, Maya sat alone at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen. The office was quiet now, most employees having left for the day. She replayed the events of the meeting in her mind, wondering what she could have done differently. Had she missed something during the review process? Could she have caught the error before it reached the client? Doubts swirled in her head, but deep down, she knew this wasn't entirely her fault. What hurt the most wasn't the mistake itself. It was the way Richard had handled it. He hadn't investigated the issue or considered the bigger picture. Instead, he had jumped straight to blaming her, reinforcing every stereotype and bias she had ever faced in her career. As she packed up her things to leave, Maya resolved to find a way forward. She couldn't change what had happened, but she could decide how to respond. Little did she know, this incident would mark the beginning of a journey that would test her resilience, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately lead her to discover her true strength. The days following the disastrous meeting were some of the hardest Maya had ever faced at work. The weight of Richard's accusations hung over her like a dark cloud, making it difficult to focus on anything else. Every time she walked into the office, she felt the eyes of her colleagues on her, some curious, others judgmental, and a few sympathetic. But sympathy wasn't enough to shield her from the growing tension in the workplace. Word had spread quickly about what had happened. During the emergency meeting, and while some people whispered behind closed doors, others openly avoided her altogether. It was as if being called irresponsible by the CEO had somehow tainted her reputation, turning her into a pariah overnight. Maya tried to push through the discomfort, focusing instead on finding ways to fix the problem. She knew that dwelling on the past wouldn't help anyone. What mattered now was preventing similar mistakes in the future. So she began drafting a detailed plan to improve the review process for reports and presentations. Her idea was simple yet effective: create a checklist system where multiple team members would sign off on each stage of preparation before moving forward. This way, responsibility would be shared equally, and errors could be caught early. Excited by the potential impact of her proposal, Maya sent an email outlining her suggestions to Richard and copied several senior managers. But her enthusiasm was met with silence. Days passed without any response, not even an acknowledgement that her email had been read. When she followed up politely, asking if they had considered her ideas, Richard replied curtly, saying, "We'll discuss this later." Yet later never came. Instead, he continued assigning her menial tasks unrelated to her role, further sidelining her from important projects. It was clear that Richard wasn't interested in improving processes. He just wanted to punish her for the mistake, whether or not she deserved it. The isolation Maya felt grew worse with each passing day. Colleagues who once collaborated seamlessly with her suddenly became distant. During meetings, they hesitated to include her in discussions, afraid of drawing Richard's ire. Even small gestures, like sharing lunch plans or chatting casually by the coffee machine, disappeared. Maya couldn't blame them entirely. They were simply trying to protect themselves, but their actions still stung. She began spending more time alone, eating at her desk or taking long walks outside during breaks to escape the suffocating atmosphere inside the office. Despite the mounting pressure, Maya refused to let herself crumble. She reminded herself daily of why she had chosen this career path in the first place. Growing up, she had always dreamed of breaking barriers and proving that her voice mattered. Now, more than ever, she needed to hold on to that dream. Still, It wasn't easy. There were moments when self-doubt crept in, whispering cruel thoughts in her ear. Was she really cut out for this kind of environment? Had she made a wrong choice by staying so long in a company that didn't value her contributions? One evening, after another grueling day at work, Maya decided to call her best friend, Lisa. They hadn't spoken in weeks due to their busy schedules, but Maya desperately needed someone to talk to. As soon as Lisa picked up the phone, Maya poured out everything. The embarrassing meeting, Richard's unfair treatment, the cold shoulders from coworkers, and the overwhelming sense of isolation. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face. Lisa listened patiently, offering words of encouragement. "Maya," she said gently, "you've always been one of the strongest people I know. Don't let this break you. You didn't cause that mistake single-handedly, and you shouldn't have to carry all the blame. If your company won't stand up for you, then maybe it's time you stood up for yourself." Her words struck a chord deep within Maya. For so long she had believed that enduring mistreatment silently was the only way to survive in such a competitive industry. But Lisa's advice made her realize something important. Staying silent wasn't resilience. It was surrender. True strength came from speaking up, even when it was scary. With renewed determination, Maya vowed to take control of her situation instead of letting it control her. Over the next few days, Maya started documenting every interaction with Richard and other senior leaders. She saved emails highlighting unreasonable demands, recorded instances of unfair criticism, and noted patterns of bias in how decisions were made. At first, she wasn't sure what she would do with all this information, but having concrete evidence gave her a sense of empowerment. It was like building a safety net, one that might come in handy if things escalated further. Meanwhile, rumors about Maya's predicament began circulating beyond the office walls. A former colleague reached out to her after hearing about the incident from mutual acquaintances. Over coffee, they expressed concern and offered support, reminding her that she wasn't alone in facing workplace discrimination. Their conversation reignited Maya's hope. She realized there were others who understood her struggles and were willing to help. Slowly but surely, she started reconnecting with mentors and friends from previous jobs, expanding her network and exploring new opportunities. One particularly challenging afternoon, Richard summoned Maya to his office under the guise of discussing her recent performance. When she arrived, however, it quickly became apparent that this wasn't a constructive conversation. Richard launched into yet another lecture, criticizing her supposed lack of initiative and accusing her of failing to take ownership of her mistakes. Each word felt like a dagger aimed straight at her confidence. This time, though, Maya didn't stay silent. Summoning every ounce of courage, she looked him directly in the eye and said, "With all due respect, Richard, I've worked tirelessly to ensure quality in my work. The mistake we discussed wasn't mine alone. It was a collective oversight. If you're looking for accountability, perhaps we should examine the entire process rather than placing undue blame on one person." Her voice trembled slightly, but her resolve remained firm. Richard stared at her, clearly taken aback by her boldness. He opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it. Instead, he dismissed her with a curt nod, ending the meeting abruptly. As Maya walked back to her desk, she felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, pride, and a lingering fear of retaliation. But one thing was certain: she had finally found her voice. That night, unable to sleep, Maya reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the countless hours she had invested in the company, the sacrifices she had made, and the dreams she had pursued. And then she thought about Richard's behavior, the dismissive comments, the double standards, the refusal to acknowledge her worth. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of leaving. It wasn't an easy decision. Walking away meant giving up years of hard work and starting over somewhere new. But staying meant continuing to endure disrespect and injustice, sacrificing pieces of herself bit by bit. As dawn broke the next morning, Maya sat at her kitchen table with a pen and paper. She began writing, not a resignation letter just yet, but a list of goals and aspirations. What did she truly want from her career? Where could she find an environment that valued diversity, equity, and inclusion? Who were the people who inspired her and believed in her potential? By the time she finished, the page was filled with ideas and possibilities. For the first time in months, Maya smiled. A small, tentative smile, but a hopeful one nonetheless. Little did she know, this moment marked a turning point. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Maya was ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. She had discovered something powerful within herself, the ability to rise above adversity and fight for what she deserved. And in doing so, she set the stage for a journey that would redefine not only her career but also her life. Maya's decision to document everything became her lifeline during those difficult weeks. She carried a small notebook everywhere, jotting down details of every interaction with Richard and other senior leaders. Emails that contained unreasonable demands or dismissive remarks were carefully saved in a folder on her computer labeled Evidence. At first, the act of recording these moments felt strange, almost like she was preparing for battle. But over time, it gave her a sense of control. For so long, she had felt powerless against Richard's accusations and the silent complicity of her coworkers. Now, she was building a case, not just for herself, but for anyone else who might face similar treatment in the future. One afternoon, after another round of harsh criticism from Richard during a team meeting, Maya decided it was time to take action. She scheduled an appointment with the Human Resources (HR) department, hoping they would provide some guidance, or at least listen without judgment. When she walked into the HR office, she was greeted by Sarah, a representative known for her calm demeanor and professional approach. Maya explained her situation calmly, starting from the initial mistake in the report to Richard's public shaming and ongoing mistreatment. She even showed Sarah some of the emails and notes she had collected as evidence. At first, Sarah seemed genuinely concerned. She nodded sympathetically as Maya spoke, occasionally interjecting with questions to clarify certain points. "It sounds like you've been put in a very challenging position," Sarah said at one point, her tone soft and reassuring. But when Maya mentioned Richard's biased behavior and the lack of support from her colleagues, Sarah's expression shifted ever so slightly. It was subtle, a flicker of hesitation, but Maya noticed it immediately. "We'll look into this," Sarah assured her, though her voice lacked conviction. "These kinds of issues are delicate and we need to handle them carefully." Maya left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic, believing that HR might finally step in to address the problem. However, days turned into weeks and nothing changed. There were no follow-up meetings, no investigations, and certainly no consequences for Richard. In fact, things seemed to get worse for Maya. Richard began micromanaging her tasks more aggressively, scrutinizing every detail of her work and finding fault wherever possible. Even minor errors, which would have been overlooked for others, became grounds for criticism. The silence from HR was deafening. Maya realized that the system designed to protect employees wasn't protecting her. It was protecting Richard. The realization hit her hard, leaving her frustrated and disillusioned. She had trusted the process only to find out that it was rigged against people like her. Still, she refused to give up. If the company wouldn't stand up for her, then she would have to stand up for herself and find allies outside the organization. Over the next few weeks, Maya reached out to former colleagues and mentors from previous jobs. These were people who had seen her grow professionally and knew the value she brought to any team. One of them was James, a former manager who had always appreciated her dedication and creativity. When Maya called him explaining her current predicament, he listened intently before offering advice. "You're too talented to waste your energy on a toxic environment," he told her. "There are companies out there that will appreciate what you have to offer, not just your skills but your perspective." James connected her with a recruiter friend who specialized in placing professionals in forward-thinking organizations. Through this connection, Maya learned about a tech startup that prioritized diversity and inclusion. The company was growing rapidly and looking for someone with her expertise to lead their marketing strategy. Intrigued, Maya arranged an informational interview with the hiring manager. From the moment she stepped into the startup's bright, open-concept office, she felt a difference. The atmosphere was collaborative, with employees chatting freely and brainstorming ideas on whiteboards scattered throughout the space. During the interview, the hiring manager emphasized the importance of equity and innovation, two values Maya deeply believed in. While exploring new opportunities, Maya also began sharing her story with trusted friends and mentors. She didn't do it to seek pity or vent her frustrations. Rather, she wanted to raise awareness about the challenges women of color faced in corporate settings. Her experiences resonated with many, sparking conversations about systemic bias and the need for change. One of her former colleagues, Priya, suggested she write an anonymous blog post detailing her journey. "Your story could inspire others going through the same thing," Priya encouraged. Though hesitant at first, Maya eventually agreed. Writing the post allowed her to process her emotions while also reaching a wider audience. As Maya continued navigating her options, she found herself reflecting on her identity and purpose. Growing up, she had often been told she needed to work twice as hard to prove herself. At the time, she had accepted this as a fact of life, internalizing the idea that success required sacrifice. But now, sitting alone in her apartment late at night, she questioned whether that belief was truly serving her. Why should she have to endure disrespect and injustice just to succeed? Wasn't her worth enough on its own? These thoughts lingered in her mind as she drafted her resignation letter. It wasn't an easy decision, far from it. Leaving meant giving up years of hard work and stepping into the unknown. But staying meant continuing to tolerate a toxic environment where she felt undervalued and disrespected. After much deliberation, Maya concluded that her mental health and dignity were worth more than any title or paycheck. With trembling hands, she signed the letter and placed it in an envelope, ready to hand it to Richard the following day. When Maya walked into Richard's office to deliver her resignation, she expected anger, or perhaps indifference. What she didn't expect was the condescending lecture that followed. Richard barely glanced at the letter before launching into yet another tirade. "You know, Maya," he said, his tone dripping with superiority. "You could have gone far here if you'd just taken responsibility for your actions. Instead, you chose to walk away." For a moment, Maya felt the familiar sting of his words. But this time, something inside her shifted. She realized she no longer needed his validation, or anyone else's for that matter. Looking him squarely in the eye, she replied, "With all due respect, Richard, the only mistake I made was thinking this company valued integrity over ego. You created a culture where fear trumps fairness, and I refuse to be part of that anymore." Her response left Richard momentarily speechless. He opened his mouth as if to retort but closed it again, visibly flustered. As Maya walked out of his office for the final time, she felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Outside the building, she paused to take a deep breath, savoring the crisp autumn air. For the first time in months, she felt free. Later that evening, Maya received dozens of messages from friends, former colleagues, and even acquaintances congratulating her on her courage. Many shared their own stories of workplace discrimination, thanking her for speaking up and inspiring them to do the same. One message stood out in particular. It was from Lisa, her best friend. "I'm so proud of you," Lisa wrote. "This isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning of something better." Reading those words, Maya smiled. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to embrace whatever came next. By leaving the toxic environment behind, she had reclaimed her power, and in doing so, she had taken the first step toward creating a brighter future for herself and others like her. Maya's departure from the company marked a turning point, not just in her life, but also in the lives of those who had watched her journey unfold. News of her resignation spread quickly through the office, sparking a mix of reactions among her colleagues. Some whispered that she had given up too easily, unable to handle the pressure of such a demanding workplace. Others admired her courage, recognizing that walking away took far more strength than staying in an environment that constantly undermined her worth. Yet despite the chatter, one thing was clear. Maya's exit left a void in the team. one that no amount of gossip or speculation could fill. In the weeks following her resignation, Maya threw herself into her new role at the tech startup. The contrast between her old job and this new position was striking. At the startup, collaboration wasn't just encouraged, it was celebrated. Ideas flowed freely, and employees were valued not for their ability to conform, but for their unique perspectives. For the first time in years, Maya felt truly seen and appreciated. Her contributions weren't met with skepticism or dismissed because of her background. They were embraced as integral to the company's growth. This sense of belonging gave her confidence a much-needed boost, allowing her creativity to flourish in ways she hadn't thought possible. But Maya didn't stop there. Inspired by the conversations she'd had with friends and mentors during her transition, she decided to use her platform to advocate for change. She began speaking at conferences and panel discussions about workplace diversity, inclusion, and the importance of creating equitable environments. Her talks resonated deeply with audiences, many of whom approached her afterward to share their own stories of bias and discrimination. Listening to them, Maya realized how widespread these issues were and how rarely they were addressed openly. Determined to make a difference, she started mentoring young professionals, particularly women of color, helping them navigate the challenges of building careers in industries still dominated by outdated norms. Back at her former company, however, things were unraveling. Rumors about Richard's leadership style had begun to surface outside the organization. Former employees who had left under similar circumstances came forward, sharing their experiences on social media and professional networking platforms. One ex-employee recounted how Richard had publicly humiliated her during a meeting, calling her lazy when she requested time off for a family emergency. Another described being passed over for promotions despite consistently exceeding expectations, all while less qualified male colleagues advanced rapidly within the company. These stories painted a damning picture of Richard's management approach, shedding light on patterns of favoritism, sexism, and racial bias. As more voices joined the chorus, journalists took notice. A local business magazine published an exposé titled "The Cost of Toxic Leadership," featuring interviews with several former employees, including Maya. Though she chose to remain anonymous in the article, her insights provided critical context for understanding how systemic inequities persisted, even in modern workplaces. The piece went viral almost overnight, prompting calls for accountability and reform across industries. Meanwhile, inside the company, tensions simmered. Employees who had once remained silent out of fear now found themselves questioning whether they wanted to continue working under Richard's leadership. Morale plummeted as turnover rates soared. Senior leaders scrambled to address the growing crisis, holding town hall meetings and promising sweeping changes. But their efforts rang hollow without concrete action. Employees demanded transparency, pointing out that HR had repeatedly failed to intervene in cases of discrimination and abuse. Trust in leadership eroded further, leaving the company in disarray. For Richard, the fallout proved devastating. Once revered as a tough but effective CEO, he now faced mounting scrutiny both internally and externally. Shareholders grew increasingly concerned about the negative publicity and its impact on the company's reputation. When internal investigations revealed evidence supporting allegations of discriminatory practices, the board had little choice but to act. After months of resistance, Richard was asked to step down, a decision that shocked some but satisfied many. Though Maya never sought revenge, hearing about Richard's downfall brought her a quiet sense of vindication. It wasn't about gloating or proving him wrong. It was about justice finally being served. More importantly, it reinforced her belief that truth and integrity always prevailed in the end, even if it took time. Life after leaving her toxic workplace transformed Maya in profound ways. Professionally, she thrived in her new role, earning recognition not just for her skills but for her ability to inspire others. Personally, she rediscovered parts of herself she had buried under years of self-doubt and compromise. Spending weekends, hiking, journaling, or simply enjoying moments of solitude became part of her routine again. She learned to prioritize her well-being, setting boundaries that protected her mental and emotional health. Her advocacy work continued to gain momentum. Through her blog posts, public speaking engagements, and mentorship programs, Maya built a community of like-minded individuals committed to driving change. Together, they challenged stereotypes, dismantled barriers, and created spaces where everyone could thrive regardless of race, gender, or background. Watching others succeed because of the support she provided filled her with immense pride. Looking back on her journey, Maya often reflected on the lessons she had learned along the way. She realized that resilience wasn't about enduring mistreatment. Silently, it was about standing up for yourself even when it felt terrifying. It was about refusing to settle for anything less than respect and fairness. And perhaps most importantly, it was about using your voice not just for yourself but for those who couldn't speak up yet. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the sunset, Maya received a message from Lisa. "Remember when you doubted yourself?" Lisa wrote. "Look at everything you've accomplished since then. You're unstoppable." Reading those words, Maya smiled softly. She knew she still had challenges ahead, but she also knew she was ready to face them head-on. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful, not just for herself but for the future of workplaces everywhere. By choosing to leave behind what no longer served her, Maya had opened doors she never imagined possible and inspired countless others to do the same. Months passed, and Maya's life began to settle into a rhythm that felt both fulfilling and meaningful. Her days were filled with purpose, working at the tech startup, mentoring young professionals, writing articles, and speaking at events. Each role allowed her to grow in different ways, but what truly energized her was seeing the impact of her efforts. At the startup, she spearheaded initiatives that not only improved processes, but also fostered an inclusive culture where everyone felt valued. Her colleagues admired her ability to lead with empathy and vision, qualities that set her apart from traditional managers who often prioritized results over relationships. One morning, as Maya prepared for a team meeting, she received an email notification on her phone. It was from a former colleague named Priya, someone she had worked closely with during her time at the old company. The subject line read, "Update on Richard." Curious, Maya opened the message. Priya explained that Richard's resignation had officially been announced earlier that week. According to internal sources, the board had reached its decision after uncovering additional evidence of discriminatory practices and unethical behavior. What surprised Maya most was the public statement released by the company, which acknowledged systemic issues within its leadership structure and pledged to implement sweeping reforms. While Maya didn't feel any personal satisfaction in Richard's downfall, she couldn't deny the significance of the moment. For years, employees like her had endured his harsh demeanor and biased decisions without recourse. Now justice was finally being served, not just for her, but for everyone who had suffered under his leadership. Still, Maya knew this wasn't the end of the story. Removing one problematic leader wouldn't magically fix decades of ingrained inequities. Real change required sustained effort, accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. That evening, Maya attended a virtual panel discussion hosted by a professional organization focused on diversity in the workplace. She was invited to share her experiences alongside other trailblazers who had faced similar challenges. As the moderator introduced each speaker, Maya listened intently to their stories, some heartbreaking, others inspiring, but all united by a common thread: resilience. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath and began recounting her journey, starting with the fateful day of the presentation mistake and ending with her decision to leave the toxic environment behind. "I left because I realized staying would mean compromising my values," Maya said, her voice steady yet passionate. "But leaving wasn't easy. There were moments when I doubted myself, wondering if I'd made the right choice. What kept me going was the belief that I deserved better, and so did everyone else." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom expressed gratitude in the chat for her honesty and courage. After the event ended, Maya scrolled through the messages flooding her inbox. One stood out, a heartfelt note from a young woman named Aisha, who described herself as a recent graduate struggling to navigate corporate America. "Your story gave me hope," Aisha wrote. "I've already faced so much bias in my short career, and sometimes I wonder if I belong here. But hearing you talk about standing up for yourself reminded me why I started this journey in the first place. Thank you." Reading Aisha's message brought tears to Maya's eyes. She remembered feeling exactly the same way when she was younger, unsure, vulnerable, and desperate for guidance. Knowing that her story could inspire someone else to keep pushing forward filled her with immense pride. That night she responded to Aisha, offering advice and encouraging her to stay true to herself no matter what challenges lay ahead. As weeks turned into months, Maya continued expanding her advocacy work. She partnered with nonprofits dedicated to promoting equity in education and employment, helping them develop programs aimed at empowering underrepresented communities. One project she particularly loved involved mentoring high school students interested in STEM fields. Many of these students came from backgrounds similar to hers, and seeing their excitement and determination reminded her of her own dreams as a teenager. During one session, a student asked her how she stayed motivated despite facing so many obstacles. Smiling warmly, Maya replied, "By focusing on what matters most, the people I want to help, and the world I want to create." Her influence extended beyond formal settings too. Through social media, Maya connected with individuals around the globe who shared her passion for equality and inclusion. Together, they formed online communities where members exchanged ideas, supported one another, and celebrated victories, big and small. These connections reinforced Maya's belief in the power of collective action. Change didn't happen overnight, but every step forward, even the smallest ones, counted. Back at the tech startup, Maya's contributions earned her a promotion to senior leadership. Her new role involved shaping company policies and ensuring they aligned with the organization's commitment to diversity and innovation. This responsibility thrilled her. It meant she could directly influence how future generations of employees experienced the workplace. Under her guidance, the company launched several groundbreaking initiatives, including unconscious bias training for managers, mentorship programs for women and minorities, and flexible work arrangements designed to accommodate diverse needs. Despite her growing responsibilities, Maya never lost sight of her roots. She remained grounded, regularly checking in with friends and mentors who had supported her along the way. Lisa, her best friend, often joked that Maya's success hadn't changed her one bit. "You're still the same determined, compassionate person I met years ago," Lisa said during one of their coffee catch-ups. "The only difference is now everyone else sees it too." Though Maya cherished her achievements, she knew there was still work to be done. The fight for equity and inclusion was far from over, especially in industries resistant to change. Yet she approached each challenge with optimism, knowing she wasn't alone. Countless allies, both known and unknown, stood beside her, ready to push boundaries and break barriers. One afternoon, while reviewing data for an upcoming presentation, Maya paused to reflect on how far she'd come. From enduring public humiliation in a conference room to leading transformative efforts at a progressive company, her journey had been anything but predictable. Along the way, she had discovered strengths she didn't know she possessed and forged bonds that would last a lifetime. Most importantly, she had learned that resilience wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about embracing it, learning from it, and using it to fuel growth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues, across her living room, Maya smiled softly. She thought about all the people whose lives had intersected with hers, those who had inspired her, challenged her, and believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. Their collective impact reminded her that change wasn't achieved in isolation. It was a shared endeavor, built on trust, collaboration, and unwavering determination. For Maya, the road ahead promised more challenges, more lessons, and undoubtedly more triumphs. But she welcomed it all with open arms, confident in the knowledge that she had found her purpose, not just as a professional, but as a catalyst for change. And as long as there were voices waiting to be heard and dreams waiting to be realized. She vowed to keep fighting for a world where everyone could thrive. Years passed, and Maya's influence continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways she could have never imagined. Her journey from being unfairly blamed and fired to becoming a beacon of hope for marginalized communities became the stuff of legend, not just within her industry but far beyond it. People began referring to her not just as a survivor of workplace bias, but as a pioneer who had transformed adversity into opportunity. Yet despite her growing fame, Maya remained humble, always quick to remind others that her story was one among many. At the tech startup, Maya's leadership style earned widespread admiration. She wasn't just a manager, she was a mentor, a listener, and a problem solver. Employees often remarked how approachable she was, even during high-pressure situations. "Maya doesn't just tell us what to do," one team member said during a company-wide feedback session. "She asks questions, listens to our ideas, and helps us find solutions together." This collaborative approach fostered loyalty and trust, creating an environment where innovation thrived. Her impact extended beyond the office walls. Through her advocacy work, Maya inspired countless individuals to challenge systemic inequities and demand better treatment in their workplaces. One of her proudest accomplishments was launching a nationwide campaign called Equity at Work, which provided resources and training to companies committed to fostering inclusive environments. The program quickly gained traction, with hundreds of organizations signing up to participate. Seeing CEOs and executives attend workshops on dismantling bias filled Maya with a sense of accomplishment, proof that change was possible when people were willing to learn. Despite her busy schedule, Maya made time to connect personally with those seeking guidance. Whether through mentoring sessions, keynote speeches, or casual conversations over coffee, she shared insights gleaned from her own experiences. Her advice was simple yet profound. Speak your truth, no matter how scary it feels. You never know whose life you might inspire by doing so. One such conversation took place during a conference in Chicago. After delivering a powerful speech about overcoming workplace discrimination, Maya stayed behind to answer questions from attendees. Among them was a young man named Marcus who hesitated before approaching her. "I'm not sure if I should say anything," he admitted nervously, "but I feel like my situation is hopeless." Curious, Maya encouraged him to share more. As Marcus spoke, she learned that he worked at a construction firm where racial slurs were casually tossed around, and his contributions were routinely dismissed because of his age and ethnicity. Despite filing multiple complaints with HR, nothing had changed. "It's exhausting," he confessed. "Sometimes I wonder if leaving is the only option." Maya nodded sympathetically, understanding exactly how he felt. "Leaving isn't failure," she told him gently. "Staying in a toxic environment can cost you more than just your job. It can take away pieces of yourself. But before making any decisions, ask yourself this: what kind of future do you want? Then focus on building toward that, step by step." Marcus left their conversation visibly lighter, thanking Maya for her wisdom. Weeks later, he emailed her to say he'd decided to leave his job and pursue opportunities in a different field, one that aligned with his values. Reading his message brought tears to Maya's eyes. It reminded her why she kept sharing her story, because every voice mattered and every person deserved to be heard. Meanwhile, back at her old company, signs of progress emerged slowly but surely. Following Richard's resignation, the board hired a new CEO, a woman named Elena Rodriguez, known for her commitment to diversity and ethical leadership. Under her guidance, the company implemented sweeping reforms, including mandatory diversity training, transparent promotion processes, and regular employee surveys to gauge satisfaction and identify areas for improvement. While some skeptics doubted whether these changes would stick, others believed they marked the beginning of a brighter chapter. Elena reached out to Maya shortly after taking over, inviting her to consult on the company's inclusion initiatives. At first, Maya hesitated. Returning to the place where she had endured so much pain seemed daunting. But after careful consideration, she agreed. realizing that helping reshape the culture could prevent others from experiencing what she had gone through. Over several months, Maya collaborated with Elena and her team, offering practical strategies and candid feedback. By the end of the project, the company looked vastly different, not perfect but moving in the right direction. As Maya reflected on these developments, she couldn't help but marvel at how interconnected everything felt. Every choice she had made, from documenting Richard's behavior to walking away with dignity, had led her to this moment. Each act of courage, no matter how small, had contributed to a larger wave of change. And while she knew there would always be setbacks, she also knew that resilience was contagious. When one person stood up, others followed suit, creating a chain reaction of empowerment. In her personal life, Maya found joy in rediscovering passions she had neglected during her years of struggle. She picked up painting again, filling canvases with vibrant colors that reflected her renewed spirit. On weekends, she joined a local hiking group, exploring trails that offered breathtaking views and moments of peace. These activities reminded her to celebrate not just her achievements but also the everyday beauty surrounding her. Yet perhaps the most fulfilling part of Maya's journey was the relationships she nurtured along the way. Friends, mentors, and mentees alike became pillars of support, reminding her that she didn't have to navigate life's challenges alone. Lisa remained her confidant, always ready with a listening ear or a well-timed joke. James, her former manager, invited her to speak at his university alumni event, introducing her as one of the strongest leaders I've ever known. Even Priya, her former colleague, reconnected with her, expressing gratitude for Maya's unwavering optimism during tough times. One evening, as Maya sat on her balcony watching the stars twinkle above, she thought about the phrase Lisa had once used to describe her: unstoppable. It struck her then that being unstoppable wasn't about never facing obstacles. It was about continuing to move forward despite them. Maya had faced plenty of hurdles, but each one had taught her something valuable: patience, perseverance, compassion, and self-belief. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Aisha, the young woman who had reached out months earlier. "Just wanted to let you know I got the internship I applied for," Aisha wrote excitedly. "Your advice gave me the confidence to keep going, even when things felt impossible. Thank you for believing in me." Reading the message, Maya smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her face. She typed back a heartfelt reply, congratulating Aisha and encouraging her to keep chasing her dreams. As she set her phone down, she realized something profound. Her legacy wouldn't be measured by titles or accolades. It would be defined by the lives she touched and the ripples of change she created. Looking ahead, Maya knew there were still battles to fight and barriers to break. But she approached the future with hope, knowing she wasn't alone. Around the world, people were rising up, demanding fairness and equality. Together, they formed a movement stronger than any individual, a testament to the power of unity and determination. For Maya, the journey had been long and arduous, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. She had reclaimed her dignity, rebuilt her career, and inspired countless others to do the same. More importantly, she had discovered her true purpose: to stand as a voice for the voiceless and a light in the darkness. And as long as there were injustices to confront and dreams to fulfill, Maya vowed to keep shining brightly, proving that resilience, empathy, and courage could indeed change the world.